Hello, everybody. My name is Adam Lenander. I am working in Deutsche Bank as a member of the Group Agile Accelerator team. We are a central team that is supporting the Agile adoption across the various engineering functions across the whole of DB globally. I've been working in DB for a number of years, working within the credit risk area and within the HR transformation team that have made big strides in moving the HR digital office from a classic waterfall approach to project management into agile ways of working. And a lot of what we're going to be talking through today is the consequences for the people involved in that process in the HR transformation that has been underway for the past 18 months. We started doing the transformation within HR, IT, and the associated change areas back in April 2019. It seems like a very long time ago now, especially with the changes we've seen in the recent years. And we faced an interesting challenge there because there was a very divided group of functional capabilities within the teams that we were looking to bring together. The HR function as a whole had been responding to a series of changes that had taken place over a number of years. And the IT department had been supporting the implementation of a very large new complex system in order to support the HR function globally. This new system, as I was joining the team, was in the processes of building up to the first big release and the go live, a very large go live that was going to be taking place globally. So the initial interaction we had with the various leadership was going to be quite limited because the focus was on the delivery of this large new capability within the firm. But there's a real key thing here around trying to make change within an organization. There's different interlinked activities that you have to be mindful of if you're looking to make a change. And we're aware of the fact that we couldn't make significant change without being able to get the engagement of people around this process. So the initial part of the transformation was heavily invested in trying to get people to understand some of the ideas that we were looking to move ahead with. And that was focused very, very closely on the leadership team as we started, so that they would be ready to support the process as we then moved beyond the big implementation of the new system, and people were looking to the future, and with that, the change to an agile way of working. Now, it's often it's often thought by leadership that they need to try to have some kind of impact on the culture. And one of the key things that we were looking to make people aware of is the fact that you can't directly influence culture. You can't ask people to think in a different way. You can't ask people to communicate in a different way just by sending them an email or asking them to do nicely in a town hall meeting. People respond to the organization in which they work. And the way that they communicate with each other is often shaped by that very organizational structure. So the initial conversations we're having with people was about, if you want people to act in a different way, you have to bring them together in a different way. And this is where we got the leadership focused on the aligning of the organization around end-to-end value. Now, this seems to be moving away from the topic of people if we're talking about organizational structures. But the point behind this was, what we finally did was we gave people the direct access to each other so they could then start sharing their experiences. They started working together very, very closely. And it moved it from being an us and them approach, whereby people were going from one function within the organization and passing information over to another function in the organization, to it there being a shared problem. And by bringing people together this way, we started to build the bonds between them, and we saw that the skills that people had on that could bring to the table were being far more appreciated by those new people they were working with. This bringing together of the HR change function and the IT functions around common objectives by reorganizing the teams around the end-to-end value led to much, much higher levels of communication. Now, initially, we was able to do this in person, and we actually took people out to India where our IT teams were based, and we actually got them to work through this process in a number of workshops over a period of a week or two. But then, unfortunately, the COVID crisis struck, and that led to us having to pivot and take a different approach. So we had to do an awful lot more work virtually in introducing teams. And this is at the same time that the bank was reacting to all the shocks that were hitting the whole of the global economy as we were going through March and April last year. So there was a lot of focus then on giving people time to talk to each other so that they could actually start to build up this team culture, despite the fact they were struggling with a very rapid change in the way that they worked and a big upset to the way that they would normally be communicating with each other, even within the local areas. So there was a lot of focus being put on giving people time, giving people the opportunity to raise queries and to speak to them, because it was getting that alignment within the teams that we knew would give people that kind of shared purpose. And that shared purpose is what would start to drive the cultural changes that we were looking to bring to the organisation. One of the key things that we've made very clear right at the beginning of this process is that we were going to be reliant on the people involved in the process to make it a success. This wasn't something that was going to be a case of expecting more from people by demanding more from people and not getting their say in the process. So we opened ourselves up to the input from people who, up until that point, have been more used to actually being given project plans with expectations of what had to be delivered by when. And we got people involved in this conversation. So there was a lot of focus on trust and making sure that people understood that if they raised particular queries or there was a particular issue they had, then we wanted them to speak up and we would actually take their concerns seriously. And this was something that we worked very hard on. We continuously communicated. We almost consciously tried to over communicate. We made sure that we were visible and that we're available whenever there was any particular queries coming. And by doing this and moving through each team step by step and helping them on that journey, we started to build the trust as well between the new team members that were working together for the first time. So these were squads where we had HR people and IT people working together in the same squad at the same time, and saying to them, well, actually, you're the expert. You're the people who know how this stuff works. So we're going to trust you to come up with the best solution, and then you can show us how we can hit our objectives by delivering these things together. And through this, we started to see a shift in the way people communicated with each other and a shift in the performance of the actual outputs from the teams. As part and parcel of this process, we decided to focus on 4 key areas that we used as a drumbeat in the background. We repeated these things to the point where if there's any of my colleagues from HR watching this now, they'll probably roll their eyes at seeing these slides, because we show these things so often. But there was 4 key themes that we thought was absolutely critical to driving this change in a way that we wanted to work and to help people understand what it is that we wanted, because we couldn't make big changes overnight to huge amounts of architectural complexity. The HR function we face off to was under immense strain as we were going through the changes that COVID brought to us. So we had to have a very clear set of outcomes and a clear set of guidelines for people so that they could use their own skills to help us move forward. And so we embraced the skills of the people that we had, knowing that these people had to face up to what was an absolutely huge change in the way of working, but they had to step up to that very fast. So one of the key things for us, the first thing was transparency. There was no hiding of information. All the roles, all the objectives, everything we're trying to do was all put on open access Confluence sites. And these weren't just within HR, these were open to anyone in the whole of the firm. We actively engaged with people. We continuously went out to them. We continuously asked for their inputs and for their views on things. We ran surveys. And we engaged them in various meetings, frequent town halls, and tried to get people working as collaboratively as possible so that they felt that their voice could be heard. And we also made a very clear point about setting realistic expectations. So the demand on the organisation was, as is normal with these kinds of things, especially in times of crisis, was way in excess of our ability to actually meet that. So we made some very, very clear and very, very public calls around prioritisation, so that people understood that there was a realistic chance that they could deliver the book of work rather than just being swamped with a huge amount of demand and therefore being set up to fail before they got going. We made a big call on this, as I just mentioned, on prioritisation. This was really about saying to people, do you understand, what is most important to your end user? And then what can we do to get that to them as fast as possible? So there's a lot of focus on saying to people, you understand on the business side of things where the pain is, and on the IT side, you understand the best way that we can move things quickly given the current constraints we're operating within. So we actually left it to the teams to discuss amongst themselves then to say, well, what is it that we can do in order to improve the performance of the systems for people, or to meet the various business needs that are out there? But this wasn't something that was steered centrally. It was very much delegated to the teams, and it was made clear to the teams that we trusted them to do this. And we continuously engaged with these people then. So we actually got their feedback on this to say, well, actually, is the understanding of what's the most important thing still valid? As we're trying to make these changes and we're trying to change this way of working, you tell us how these things are actually landing on the ground. And this was a really key point for us. This was getting the voice out from people. We ran our first big quarterly business review, and in that we made it clear to people that we wanted everyone to commit to the plan. And so it was, they were actively engaged in a conversation from the very beginning. By making these changes around transparency and making our prioritisation clear to everybody, it really helped promote alignment. So the discussions became far more involved. And as people realised they could actually influence this thing, the general noise in the organisation actually went up because more and more people were joining in the conversation. They understood what the purpose of the teams were. They understood what good would look like, what the outcomes that we were looking towards. And this drove consensus amongst everybody, because then they were able to raise where they thought there was going to be problems with the plans, and they started to get far more actively engaged in these conversations. And this was actively encouraged as well. We told teams that if they needed to take time, to press pause on the delivery process in order to learn a new skill, then that's something they should put into their books of work. And we gave them space to do that as well. And all of these led to a lot more alignment within the teams. And people started to get a sense of them being part of a new team structure rather than the old team structure, which was still something that was still fresh in their minds. All of these efforts, all of these things, even simple things like just letting the teams call themselves whatever they wanted to be called. We got teams calling, writing theme tunes, and suddenly all these skills within the team started coming out when people started to really feel part of a new construct. It led to a very, very different dynamic. And this led to commitment then from the teams, because when we got to the planning processes, we said to everyone, we need you to vote on this, but we want you to be honest. We really want you to say, can you commit to this plan as a group? And in doing that, we got a lot more buy-in than we'd seen in previous years. And there was some real feedback, very, very positive feedback after we finished our first big planning session with the teams. And finally, we said to people, Agile's not a free-for-all. This is not just some kind of sort of crazy, just go for it setup. There's a lot more discipline in Agile than people would appreciate. And in fact, there's probably more discipline in this way of working than there is in traditional project management approaches. Because we're really asking people, it's not just about someone looking out for whether or not you're doing the work. It's for you to look out whether or not the work is getting done. And you're responsible for that, because we've hired the best people. We've hired really intelligent people with huge amounts of skills and expertise. Well, we need to use that expertise to help the business. So we need you to come to the party and to actually make the commitment yourself. So be honest with us. If you don't think you can hit this stuff, if you think that something is being skirted over too quickly, then you need to be honest and you need to stand up and make yourself heard. You need to be involved in these various meetings. You need to be involved with your team. We don't want to hear just the same voices again and again. And finally, when we say we're going to do something, we need to commit to it. You have to give the the end user some kind of certainty about what it is that you're working towards. And it can't just be something whereby you say, well, we thought we could do it, but actually, yeah, it wasn't really my plan. We made it very clear to people that when they signed up for doing something, this was something that they were personally signing up to as well. But this discipline was good because it drove a different kind of behavior in the team. So we started to have much more honest discussions around what could and couldn't be done. So the agile approach overall is a fantastic way to obviously align organizations around teams, and it's a fantastic way to align organizations around shared objectives. But the key thing to remember is the whole of the agile construct is really designed to promote discussion and communication between people. All of the sprint disciplines are there to promote discussion and to have the conversation within the teams. Even the big quarterly planning events, that take a significant amount of effort to organize, it's really an orchestrated discussion across the department in order to align everyone's views. So the one thing I would just say is, whenever you're doing an agile transformation, always put people right at the center of the process, because the whole point of the agile process is to get people focused on each other and to get people focused on what the various problems that they're sharing are and how they can work their way to a solution in order to meet the needs of the end user. I hope you found that presentation a useful insight into some of the changes that we've done and how we've managed to make a big step forward in the HR area within the bank. Thank you very much.